On my birthday, they planned to send me to a nursing home. Little did they know I had already changed the will. The cake they cut that afternoon had the taste of revenge, but they didn't know it yet. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell, and if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Carol Ann Miller. I'm 64 years old, and until 6 months ago, I lived in my dream house in a historic neighborhood of Pasadena, California. It was a 2-story craftsman home with original Batchelder tiles that my late husband Robert and I bought in 1985, back when you could still dream of owning something of your own through honest work. The terracotta-colored walls held 40 years of memories, the laughter of my children when they were small, the Christmas dinners where the table extended into the living room, the birthdays where I baked cakes from 5 in the morning because I knew each grandchild liked a different flavor. That morning of March 15th, my birthday, I woke up as always at 5:30. My wrinkled hands, spotted with age but still steady, prepared the fresh brewed coffee with a dash of cinnamon that my mother taught me back in Ohio. The aroma filled the kitchen as I set out on the wooden table the vintage ceramic mugs that had belonged to my grandmother, Rose. I sliced the scones I had bought the day before at the corner bake shop, that tiny place on the corner where they still know you by name and ask about your family. The silence in the house was dense, heavy, not like the peaceful silence of previous mornings, but as if the very air knew something bad was about to happen. I was wearing my favorite apron, the blue one with embroidered flowers my granddaughters had given me 5 Christmases ago, when they still hugged me with genuine affection and not with that awkward haste of someone fulfilling a family duty. At 7, Patricia, my eldest son Andrew's wife, came down. Her heels clicked against the marble steps with that impatience I knew so well. She was dressed in a gray pantsuit that cost more than my 3-month pension, her hair perfectly straight, and a gaze that went right through me as if I were an old piece of furniture cluttering her modern decor. "Good morning, Patricia," I said, with the smile I had perfected over 15 years of forced cohabitation. "I made your coffee, no sugar, just how you like it." She sat down without looking at me, checking her phone with those long, blood-red nails that always made me nervous. "Carol, are you using these old mugs again?" she said without looking up. "Honestly, I don't understand how Andrew could have lived with such small-town habits before he met me." I felt a knot form in my chest, but I swallowed and replied, "They were my grandmother's mugs. I thought they'd keep the coffee warmer." "Don't just call me Patricia," she interrupted with that icy voice she used when she wanted to hurt me. "I'm the woman of the house, and I don't need someone your age to explain how to drink coffee." The kitchen clock read 7:15. Each tick-tock sounded like a drop of rain falling on my heart. My grandson, Sebastian, 12 years old, came downstairs dragging his feet, headphones on and his eyes glued to his phone. He was a beautiful boy, with his grandfather Robert's green eyes, but every day I saw him more distant, more like his mother in that coldness that chilled my veins. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, opening my arms to hug him like I did every morning since he was tiny. "Did you sleep well?" He walked past me as if I were a ghost, poured himself a glass of juice, and sat as far away from me as possible. He didn't even take off his headphones. Patricia smirked with satisfaction, as if she had won a silent battle. "Sebastian is a big boy now, Carol," she said, savoring each word. "He doesn't need you to treat him like a baby. Kids his age need independence, not coddling from overly attached grandmothers." That morning, no one remembered it was my birthday. Not a single word, not a gesture. Not even a look that acknowledged that I, Carol Ann Miller, had been born 64 years ago in a small town in Ohio, where my mother brought me into the world between pain and hope, where my father worked until his hands bled to give me an education, where I learned that family was the most sacred thing in the world. As I washed the dishes that no one thanked me for, looking out the window at the small garden where Robert had planted a lemon tree that now bore huge, sweet fruit, I remembered all the birthdays I had organized for them, the early mornings baking Andrew's favorite cake, a strawberry shortcake, the afternoons hand-sewing costumes for Sebastian's themed parties, the full days preparing the perfect dinner for Patricia, with those fancy French dishes she liked, and that I had learned to cook by watching videos online, repeating each step until they came out identical to those from the expensive restaurant where she had first tried them. All that love, all that effort, a whole life dedicated to making the people I loved most in the world happy, and they didn't even remember I had been born. When I finished cleaning the kitchen, I sat in the wicker chair Robert had bought me for the patio. There, surrounded by the scent of the bougainvillea that I had planted and cared for myself for decades, with my hands trembling from age and pain, I allowed myself to cry in silence. The tears fell on my embroidered apron as I looked towards the kitchen window, where Patricia was laughing on the phone with someone who clearly made her happier than I ever had. It was my 64th birthday, and for the first time in my life I felt completely invisible in my own home. That afternoon, while Patricia was getting ready to go out with her friends from the club, I sat in the living room looking through the photographs I kept in an old Danish cookie tin. My fingers caressed each image as if they were sacred relics. Andrew at 6, hugging me after I sewed his superhero costume for the school festival. Patricia on her wedding day, when she still smiled at me and affectionately called me Mama Carol. Newborn Sebastian, so tiny he fit in my 2 hands, looking at me with those little eyes that seemed to understand I would be his refuge in the world. When had it all started to change? At what exact moment had my family decided I was a burden instead of a blessing? I vividly remembered the day Robert died, 5 years ago now. Pancreatic cancer took him in 4 months, leaving me alone in this house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. Andrew showed up the day after the funeral with a folder full of papers, and that look I now know meant he had already made a decision for me. "Mom, you need to sign this," he had said, his voice that of someone doing a huge favor. "It's so you don't have to worry about any legal stuff. I'll take care of everything. The taxes, the maintenance, the bills. You just have to keep living peacefully." I, still wrapped in the pain of loss, trusting my eldest son blindly as I had my whole life, signed without reading. It's for the best, I thought. Andrew has a business degree. He knows about these things better than I do. I never imagined those papers transferred the house into his name. My house. The house where Robert and I had laid every brick with love, where we had raised our children, where we had grown old together dreaming of watching our grandchildren grow. For these past 5 years, I had continued to pay for everything. The electricity, the water, the gas, the food, Sebastian's medicine when he got sick, his school uniforms, his school supplies. My retired teacher's pension was gone completely each month to maintain this house that was no longer mine, while Andrew and Patricia saved their money for their trips to Hawaii, for her new car, for the private tennis lessons at the exclusive country club where they mingled with people on their level. "It's the least you can do, Carol," Patricia would tell me whenever I sighed looking at the bills. "We give you a roof over your head. You pay the expenses. It's fair, isn't it?" Fair? I had paid for Andrew's private university when Robert was barely earning enough to cover the basics. I worked double shifts giving private lessons so he could study business at USC, while I went without buying a new dress for 3 years. When he got married, I sold the jewelry my mother had left me to pay for the honeymoon in Europe that Patricia dreamed of. When Sebastian was born, I left my part-time job at the bookstore because Patricia didn't trust nannies. "I need someone from the family to watch him," she had said. "You have experience with kids, Carol. It's perfect. Perfect for her, who could go back to her job at the marketing firm without worrying about daycare or babysitters." For 12 years, I was the one who woke up in the middle of the night when Sebastian had nightmares. I was the one who took him to the doctor when he had a fever, who stayed up all night putting cool cloths on his forehead when Patricia said she was too tired from work. I was the one who helped him with his homework, who attended the parent-teacher conferences because Patricia was embarrassed for them to see she had such an old mother-in-law. I was the one who taught him to walk, holding his little hands as he took his first wobbly steps in this very living room where he now completely ignored me. I taught him to say, "Mama," before Dada, though Patricia later took credit for that. I was the one who comforted him when he fell off his bike, who sang him the lullabies my mother sang to me, who told him made-up stories where he was always the brave hero. Now that same boy walked past me as if I were part of the furniture, taught by Patricia to see me as the grandmother who lives here, instead of the woman who had raised him with unconditional love. The phone rang, interrupting my memories. It was my younger son, David, calling from Austin where he worked as an engineer. "Mom, how are you?" His voice sounded distant, busy. I could hear the office noise behind him. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just thinking." "Hey, Mom, could you help me with something? Sophie needs gallbladder surgery and the insurance won't cover everything. Do you think you could lend me $5,000? I promise I'll pay you back in 6 months." $5,000. Almost everything I had left in my savings after so many years of maintaining this house. But he was my son, and Sophie was my daughter-in-law, and they had 2 little girls. "Of course, honey. I'll go to the bank tomorrow." "You're the best, Mom. I love you so much. Oh, and sorry for not calling yesterday. I forgot it was your birthday. But you know I'm always thinking of you." I forgot. Those 2 words hurt more than anything Patricia had said to me that morning. David, my younger son, the one who had always been more affectionate, the one who promised he would never leave me alone, had also forgotten the day I brought him into the world. After hanging up, I stared at the phone. It was the 5th time in 2 years David had asked me for money. Sophie's surgery, the girls' private school tuition, the down payment for their new house, the SUV he needed for work, always with the promise of paying me back in a few months. But those months never came, and I always said yes, because they were my children, because a mother doesn't give up, because that's what I was taught from a young age, that a mother's love is unconditional, that you give without expecting anything in return. But that afternoon, sitting in my own living room that was no longer mine, surrounded by photographs of a family that had turned me into their emotional ATM, I wondered for the first time if I hadn't mistaken love for the habit of being used. Patricia came down the stairs in a new dress that surely cost what I spent on food for 2 months. She had put on the expensive perfume Andrew had given her for Valentine's Day, while he hadn't even wished me a happy birthday. "Carol, I don't know what time I'll be back. If Sebastian needs anything, give him some money to order food. Andrew will be late. He has a meeting." It wasn't a request. It was an order. As always, the door slammed shut, echoing through the empty house. Sebastian was upstairs in his room, probably playing video games or talking to his friends online, and I was left alone, like every afternoon, like every night, like every day for the last 5 years. I stood up slowly, with these knees that ached more each day, and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner for my grandson. As I peeled the potatoes, a tear fell into the sink, then another, and another. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to wonder if a lifetime of sacrifices and unconditional love was worth it, when the only response I received was indifference and contempt. That night, when everyone was asleep, I stayed awake looking out my bedroom window. The stars shone over Pasadena, the same stars Robert and I used to watch when we were young, and believed that family love was forever. Maybe it was time to stop believing in fairy tales. The following days passed in that silent routine I had learned to accept as normal. Waking up early, making breakfast, cleaning the house while they lived their lives as if I were part of the furniture. But something had changed inside me after my forgotten birthday. I began to observe more, to listen to conversations I had previously ignored, to notice details that for years I had preferred not to see. On Wednesday morning, while hanging laundry in the backyard, I heard Patricia talking on the phone. Her voice carried clearly from her bedroom window, that sweet, syrupy voice she used with her friends from the country club. "No, honey, of course not. It's temporary," she said, laughing. "Just until we find a way to, resolve the situation. My mother-in-law is getting more senile every day. Yesterday she forgot to turn off the gas stove. It's dangerous to have her here." My heart started to beat faster. I continued hanging the sheets, pretending not to listen. I already spoke to Andrew about assisted living facilities. There's a really good one in the valley, discreet for people of a certain age who need special care. And when she's no longer here, we can remodel this house like we always wanted. I dropped a clothespin on the ground. My hands trembled as I picked it up. "No, it's not cruel, Valerie. It's the most humane thing. There, she'll be with people her age, she'll have professional medical care. Here, she just feels lonely and gets in the way of our family plans. gets in the way. That phrase stabbed my chest like a needle. I, who had raised her husband, who had cared for her son, who paid the bills for the house where they lived for free, I got in the way of their family plans. Andrew has already researched everything. The place costs about $5,000 a month, but once we sell this house and buy the condo in Irvine that we want, we'll have money to spare. This area of Pasadena is getting so valuable. Sell. As if the house were hers too. As if my 40 years of life in this place meant nothing. That afternoon, when Sebastian got home from school, I tried to approach him as I used to. I found him in the kitchen, looking for something in the refrigerator. "Sweetheart, how was school?" I asked, with the smile I reserved only for him. Sebastian looked at me with that uncomfortable expression he had developed in recent months. "Fine, Grandma," he replied, without looking me in the eye, still rummaging in the fridge. "Don't you want me to make you your favorite grilled cheese? I bought that sharp cheddar you like." "No, thanks. My mom says I'm too old for you to make me food, that I have to learn to be independent." Patricia's words coming out of my grandson's mouth hurt more than if he had slapped me. Sebastian closed the refrigerator with a juice box in his hand and headed for the stairs. "Sebastian, wait." I stopped him, my voice trembling. "Do you remember when you were little and I used to sing 'Hush, Little Baby' to help you sleep?" He stopped on the first step without turning around. "Grandma, that was a long time ago. I'm not a baby anymore." "I know, sweetheart, but I thought maybe we could talk for a bit, like we used to." "My mom says it's not good to live in the past," he interrupted with a harshness that wasn't his. "It was learned. She says older people cling too much to memories and that's sad for young people." He ran up the stairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the echo of Patricia's words coming from the mouth of the boy I had raised. That night, during dinner, Andrew came home later than usual. He wore that forced smile he put on when he had news he thought I would like. "Mom, I have something to tell you," he said, sitting at the head of the table, in the spot that had been Robert's. "Patricia and I have been thinking about your well-being." Patricia smiled from her seat, elegantly cutting her chicken while avoiding my gaze. "You see, Mom, you're getting older and we work all day. It's not fair for you to be alone so much in this big house." "I don't feel alone," I lied. "I like taking care of the house, cooking, being here when Sebastian gets home from school." "But Mom," Andrew continued with that exaggerated patience one uses with small children, "yesterday you forgot to turn the stove off properly. It could have been dangerous." I remembered perfectly turning off the stove. I remembered because I always checked twice before leaving the kitchen. It was a habit I'd had since I was young and lived in the small apartment with Robert. "I turned off the stove," I said firmly. Patricia and Andrew exchanged a meaningful look, as if my denial confirmed something they had already discussed. "Mom, sometimes our memory plays tricks on us," Patricia said with that syrupy voice I had learned to hate. "It's normal at your age. That's why we thought maybe it would be good for you to be in a place where there are professionals who can take better care of you." "What kind of place?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "A retirement community," Andrew answered quickly. "A very nice one, Mom. It has gardens, activities, people your age. You'll make friends, you'll have company. And we'll visit you often." Often. Like they visited Patricia's grandmother, who had been in a nursing home for 2 years, and whom they had gone to see exactly 3 times. "I don't want to leave my home," I said with the firmest voice I could manage. "Mom, it's just not practical anymore," Andrew insisted. "This house is too big to maintain, too expensive. If we sell it, we can buy something smaller and more modern, closer to our work." Sell it. That word again. As if I had any say in the decision to sell the house where I had lived for 40 years. "This is my house," I said, feeling rage begin to boil in my chest. "Technically, Mom," Andrew said with that awkward smile, "the house is in my name. Remember? You signed the papers after Dad died." Sebastian ate in silence, headphones on, completely oblivious to the conversation that was deciding his grandmother's fate. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I tiptoed down to Robert's study. There, in the filing cabinet he had meticulously organized, I searched for the papers Andrew had made me sign 5 years ago. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid someone would hear it upstairs. I found the folder labeled Will and Properties. With trembling hands, I took out the documents and spread them on the desk where Robert used to work at night, calculating family expenses and planning our future. The first document was indeed a transfer of title. My signature was there, but something looked off. The handwriting was similar to mine, but the A's were made differently. And the date was from 2 days before Robert's funeral, when I was sedated with the tranquilizers the doctor had given me to endure the pain. They forged my signature. My own son forged my signature to steal my house. I sat in Robert's chair and cried as I hadn't even cried on the day of his death. I cried for the betrayal, for my naivety, for the years I had spent paying for the upkeep of a house that was no longer legally mine. I cried for the grandson who had lost respect for me, manipulated by a mother who saw me as an obstacle. I cried for the son I had raised with so much love and who now planned to lock me away in a nursing home to take my inheritance. But most of all, I cried for the woman I had been, Carol Ann Miller, a respected teacher, a beloved wife, a dedicated mother. That woman had died along with Robert, and in her place was this shadow who accepted humiliation and paid for the privilege of being despised in her own home. At that moment, sitting in the darkness of the study, I made the most important decision of my life. I would no longer be a victim. The next day, very early before anyone woke up, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one I had worn to Sebastian's graduation, and left the house without making a sound. I had a very important appointment to make. It was time for Carol Ann Miller to take back the reins of her own life. My first stop was the office of Mr. Ramirez, the same lawyer who had worked with Robert for years. He was an older man, with a graying mustache and gentle manners, who welcomed me into his office filled with law books and family photographs. When I explained my situation, his eyes filled with understanding and something that looked like sadness. "Mrs. Miller, what you're telling me is more common than you might imagine," he said as he reviewed a copy of the documents I had brought. "Cases of financial abuse among family members have increased significantly in recent years." He explained that the signature did indeed look forged, and that while it would be difficult to prove in court after 5 years, I had options. The most important thing was to protect what I had left before it was too late. "What do I have left?" I asked bitterly. "The house is no longer mine. My savings are spent supporting them. You have your pension, your dignity, and the right to decide your own future," he replied firmly. "And if I may suggest, Mrs. Miller, you also have the ability to create a will that truly reflects your wishes." I left that office with new documents and an appointment for the following week. For the first time in years, I felt that someone had listened to me without judgment, without treating me like a senile old woman who didn't know what she was saying. When I returned home around noon, the house was strangely quiet. Patricia was out, Sebastian was at school, and Andrew wouldn't be home until the evening. Taking advantage of the solitude, I went to my room and began to go through my belongings with new eyes. I no longer saw sentimental objects, but evidence of a life that had been worthwhile, documents that proved my history, photographs that testified to my love and sacrifice. I found my savings passbook, where I meticulously recorded every dollar I had spent on this family for the last 5 years. The numbers were staggering. Over $30,000 maintaining a house that wasn't mine, caring for people who planned to get rid of me. I also found the letters Robert had written to me during our courtship, where he promised he would always protect me, that I would never want for anything. "Carol, my love," one of them read, "I promise that when we're old, we'll sit together on the patio of our house, watching our grandchildren grow. No one will ever separate us from what we build together." Those words gave me the strength I needed for what was to come. That afternoon, when Sebastian came home from school, I tried one more time to connect with him. I found him in the living room, doing homework on the coffee table. "Sebastian, sweetheart, can I sit with you for a moment?" He looked up, annoyed, but nodded. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Do you love me?" The question took him by surprise. For a second, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who would hug me and tell me I was the most beautiful grandma in the world. "Of course I love you, Grandma," he replied, but his voice sounded automatic, as if repeating something he'd learned. "And would you like it if I left this house? This time he hesitated. He glanced towards the stairs, as if expecting his mother to appear and answer for him. It's just, Mom says you'd be better off in a place where they can take care of you, where you'd have friends your own age. And what do you think? Don't tell me what your mom thinks. Tell me what you think. Sebastian looked down and started fidgeting with his pencil. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't want you to go, Grandma, but Mom says that when you get really old you'll get sick, and it will be really sad for me to see you like that. She says it's better for you to go now while you're still okay. My heart broke. Patricia had even manipulated this, turning her cruelty into a supposed act of protection for her son. Sebastian, look at me, I said, taking his small hands in mine. I raised you since you were born. I was the one who changed your diapers when your mom was too tired. I was the one who taught you how to tie your shoes, who comforted you when you had nightmares, who took care of you when you had chickenpox. His eyes filled with tears. I remember, Grandma. Then tell me, do you think someone who loves you that much would purposely make you sad? Sebastian shook his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. And do you think it's right for them to send me away just because I'm old? Before he could answer, we heard Patricia's car in the driveway. Sebastian quickly wiped his tears and pretended to focus on his homework. Patricia came in loaded with shopping bags, laughing on the phone. Yes, honey, we're almost ready, she said, dropping the bags in the kitchen. The appointment is on Friday. Andrew already spoke with the director of the place. It's perfect for people like her. People like her. As if I were a special category of defective human being. That night at dinner, Andrew arrived with a new folder under his arm. Mom, I have good news, he announced with that perfected fake smile. We've already secured a spot at the residence. It's a beautiful place, Mom. It has gardens, a library, a TV room, and nurses 24 hours a day, Patricia added with feigned enthusiasm. You'll be so well taken care of. When? I asked in the calmest voice I could manage. We can go see the place on Friday, Andrew replied. And if you like it, you can stay starting that same day. We'll bring your things in the afternoon. Friday. In 3 days, they had decided to get rid of me. And if I don't like it? I asked. Andrew and Patricia exchanged that conspiratorial look I knew so well. Mom, I'm sure you're going to love it, Andrew said, avoiding my question. Besides, we already paid the first month in advance. It's non-refundable. They had already paid. Without asking me, without me having said yes, they had already paid for my confinement. With what money? I asked. Well, Mom, since the house is technically mine, I took out a small home equity loan, a temporary one. Andrew explained as if he were doing something completely normal. It's an investment in your well-being, a loan against my house to pay for the home where they were going to lock me away. The cruelty of the situation was so perfect, I almost had to admire their cynicism. Sebastian ate in silence, but whenever he thought no one was looking, he would glance at me with eyes full of confusion and pain. That night, when everyone was asleep, I went down to Robert's study and took out the documents Mr. Ramirez had given me. It was time to set my plan in motion. I picked up the phone and dialed David's number in Austin. It was 11 at night, but I needed to talk to him before it was too late. Mom, what happened? Are you okay? His voice sounded worried. David, I need to tell you something very important. Your brother and Patricia want to put me in a home on Friday. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mom, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Andrew has been telling me lately that you're a bit forgetful, that you're forgetting things. Him too. My younger son had also been poisoned against me. David, do you think I'm senile? No, Mom, but look, Andrew knows your day-to-day situation better. If he thinks it's for the best. And the $5,000 you asked me for last week? Would a senile person have been able to transfer that amount to you without any problems? Another uncomfortable silence. That's different, Mom. Different how, David? Am I lucid enough to give you money but not to decide where I want to live? Mom, don't get upset. If you really don't want to go, you can come live with me in Austin. For a moment, my heart filled with hope. Really, honey? Yeah, but it would have to be temporary. Sophie's pregnant again, and with the girls, the house is getting a little small. But we could put you up in the spare room for a few months, until you find something permanent. The spare room. My younger son was offering me the spare room in his house as if it were an act of charity. "Thank you, David," I said, with a calmness that surprised me. "But I think I've already found a better solution." After hanging up, I sat at Robert's desk, surrounded by papers and memories. It was early Thursday morning. In less than 24 hours, my family expected to take me to see my prison. But Carol Ann Miller had other plans. I took the documents from Mr. Ramirez and began to fill in the spaces he had left blank. It was time for my family to meet the woman I really was, not the victim they thought they could manipulate forever. The sweetest revenge was going to be my freedom. Thursday dawned differently. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't make breakfast for anyone. I dressed carefully, took my purse, and left the house before any of them woke up. I had important appointments to keep and decisions to make while I was still in charge of my own destiny. My first stop was the bank. The teller who helped me, a young woman in her 30s with a genuine smile, helped me open a new account solely in my name. I transferred all my savings, the little I had left after years of supporting a family that didn't value me. "Are you sure you want to cancel the automatic transfers, Mrs. Miller?" she asked, typing on her computer. "Completely sure," I replied with a firmness that surprised me. "And I want my physical presence to be required for any transaction on this account. Nothing over the phone, nothing online." Next, I went to the power company office. The employee, an older man with glasses, explained the procedure for transferring the service. "Normally, the homeowner handles these changes, ma'am," he said, reviewing the documents. "I am the one who has paid this bill for 5 years," I explained, showing all the receipts I had meticulously saved. "I have the right to cancel it." An hour later, I left with confirmation that the electricity service would be suspended the following Monday if new arrangements weren't made. I did the same with the gas and water. At the phone company, I canceled the internet and cable TV service. The young woman at the counter looked at me strangely when I explained I wanted to disconnect everything. "Are you sure, ma'am? You've had these services for many years." "I'm completely sure. I don't need them anymore." My next stop was the supermarket where I had bought the family groceries for decades. This time, I filled the cart only with what I needed: chamomile tea, whole wheat bread, fresh fruits and vegetables, a small chicken. Simple food for a person who was learning to live just for herself. At noon, I returned home laden with bags, but not with food for them. Patricia was in the living room, talking on the phone with that excited voice she used when she was planning something that benefited her. "Yes, honey. Tomorrow we finally get rid of the problem," she said, laughing. "Andrew has everything ready. In the afternoon we can start measuring the spaces for the remodel." She saw me arrive and quickly ended the call. "Carol, where were you? I was looking for you to help me organize your things for tomorrow." "I was taking care of some personal matters," I replied calmly, heading to the kitchen with my groceries. She followed me, curious. "What kind of matters?" "My own," I replied without turning to look at her, putting my food in the refrigerator. Patricia stood behind me, clearly annoyed by my response. For 5 years, I had answered every one of her questions, justified every outing, asked for permission for everything. This new behavior unsettled her. "Carol, I don't know what's gotten into you, but I need you to have a positive attitude tomorrow. It's an important day for the whole family." I turned slowly to face her. This woman who for 5 years had treated me like a servant, who had manipulated my grandson against me, who had planned to send me to a home as if I were a piece of old furniture that was no longer useful. "Patricia," I said in a voice I had never used with her, "tomorrow is indeed going to be a very important day, but perhaps not in the way you expect." Her eyes narrowed. For the first time in years, she didn't see me as the submissive mother-in-law she could manipulate at will. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means that Carol Ann Miller will no longer allow herself to be treated like an obstacle in her own life." I took my bags of tea and left the kitchen, leaving her with her mouth open. For the first time in 5 years, I was the one who ended a conversation with Patricia. That afternoon, when Sebastian came home from school, I waited for him in the living room. I had made a decision about my grandson, and it was time to act. "Sebastian, sit with me, please." He obeyed, but I could see the tension in his small shoulders. "I want to give you something," I said, taking an envelope from my purse. "These are all the pictures of you from the day you were born until now. There are also pictures of me with you, And some letters I wrote to you when you were a baby but never gave you." His eyes widened in surprise. "Why are you giving me this, Grandma?" "Because I want that when you're older, when you have your own family, you remember that there was someone who loved you from the very first day of your life, someone who took care of you, who protected you, who would have given her life for you." Tears started to roll down my cheeks, but my voice remained steady. "I also want you to know that what's going to happen tomorrow is not your fault. Adults sometimes make wrong decisions, and children shouldn't have to bear that responsibility." Sebastian opened the envelope and began looking at the photographs. His first smile, his first steps, the day he learned to ride a bike, every birthday, every Christmas. Years of love documented in images that Patricia could never erase. "Grandma, is it true you're leaving tomorrow?" "Yes, sweetheart, but not in the way your parents think." "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes when people don't value us, we have to teach them what it feels like to live without us." Sebastian hugged me with a strength I hadn't felt from him in months. "I don't want you to go, Grandma. This house will be so sad without you. My love, I will always be in your heart. And someday, when you're older, you'll understand why I made these decisions." That night, we ate dinner in tense silence. Andrew came home late, with a satisfied smile that made me nauseous. "Mom, everything is ready for tomorrow. We'll pick you up at 10 to go see your new home." "Did you pack your things?" Patricia asked with that false sweetness that no longer fooled me. "Everything is ready," I replied, and it was true, but not in the way they imagined. After dinner, Andrew approached me with an expression that was meant to be affectionate. "Mom, I know this is hard for you, but I want you to know we're doing this out of love. You'll be better cared for, you'll have company, activities." "Andrew," I interrupted, "do you remember when you were little and had nightmares?" He looked confused by the change of subject. "Yeah, I think so." "Do you remember how I calmed you down? I sang to you. I held you. I stayed with you until you fell back asleep." "Yes, Mom." "And do you remember when you had hepatitis at 15? I quit my job to take care of you. I stayed up for 3 weeks, feeding you with a teaspoon because you couldn't keep anything down." Andrew's eyes started to avoid mine. "Mom, that was a long time ago." "And do you remember when you and Patricia didn't have enough for the down payment on your first apartment? I sold my wedding earrings, the ones your father gave me, so you could start your life together." "Mom, I don't understand why you're telling me this now." "I'm telling you because I want that tomorrow. When you see the consequences of what you're about to do, you remember that there was a woman who sacrificed everything for you, and that woman was your mother." Andrew stood up, uncomfortable. "Mom, you're being dramatic. You'll be fine. You'll see." After everyone went to sleep, I stayed awake in my room, looking out the window at the city that had been my home for so many years. The lights of the neighboring houses went out one by one, each representing a family preparing to rest, feeling safe in their own home. I was also preparing to rest, but in a very different way. I checked the documents I had prepared with Mr. Ramirez one more time. Everything was in order. Tomorrow, when they thought they were taking me to my prison, they would discover that Carol Ann Miller had been preparing her freedom. I lay down in my bed for the last time, not with sadness, but with a strange sense of peace. For the first time in 5 years, I had spent a full day making decisions for myself, defending my rights, acting on my own dignity. Tomorrow would be the day my family discovered that the submissive old woman they thought they knew had died along with Robert. In her place, a woman who knew exactly what she was worth had been resurrected, and she was ready to prove it. Friday dawned clear, with the kind of golden light that in other circumstances I would have interpreted as a blessing. I got up at 5 in the morning, as I had for 40 years, but this time not to serve others, but to prepare for the most important day of my new life. I took a calm shower, using the lavender soap I had bought for myself the day before. I dressed in my best outfit. The navy blue dress I had worn to Andrew's wedding, the leather shoes Robert had bought me for our 20th anniversary, and the pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother. If I was going to face my family, I would do it looking like the Mrs. Carol Ann Miller I had been all my life, not the wrinkled old woman they had decided I was. At 8 in the morning, I went down to the kitchen, where Patricia was already making coffee with the nervous energy of someone excited to get rid of a problem. "Carol, you look so elegant," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Perfect for seeing your new home. Thank you, Patricia, I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Indeed. Today, I am going to see my new home. Sebastian came down shortly after, dragging his feet with swollen eyes. He had been crying. My heart ached, but I remained firm. What I was doing today was also for him, so that one day he would understand that grandparents are not disposable, that love cannot be bought with convenience. Good morning, sweetheart, I said, kissing his forehead. Good morning, Grandma, he whispered without looking me in the eye. Andrew appeared at 9, rubbing his hands together with the satisfaction he felt when he thought he had everything under control. Ready, Mom? He asked, checking his watch. I want to get there early to do all the paperwork. I'm more ready than you think, son, I replied, and something in my tone made him look at me curiously. Mom, I hope you're not going to make a scene. This is for your own good. Andrew, I promise there will be no scene from me. At 10 o'clock sharp, we left the house. Patricia stayed behind to organize my things, as she put it, although I knew she was actually anxious to start erasing any trace of my presence from what had been my home. The car ride was silent. Andrew drove with the over-concentration of someone trying to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. I looked out the window at the streets of Pasadena, memorizing every detail as if it were the last time I would see them. In a way, it was true. The Carol who had lived in submission and pain would never travel these streets again. The residence was in the valley, exactly as I had heard in Patricia's phone conversation. It was a 3-story white building, with well-kept gardens and a facade that tried to look welcoming, but reminded me more of an elegant prison. The director, a middle-aged woman with a professional smile plastered on her face, received us in her office. The walls were decorated with photos of smiling seniors participating in activities that looked more staged than genuinely fun. Mrs. Miller, so nice to meet you, she said, shaking my hand with the artificial warmth of people who work in institutions. Your son has told me so much about you. I'm sure he has, I replied, maintaining my own smile. She took us on a tour of the facility. The hallways smelled of disinfectant mixed with that cloying scent that couldn't quite mask the smell of medicine and sadness. We saw the dining room, where seniors sat at assigned tables, eating in silence while a soap opera no one seemed to be watching played on a TV. We saw the activity room, where a nurse led a crafts workshop with people who stared with vacant eyes while pretending to be entertained. And this would be your room, the director announced, opening the door to a small room with a single bed, a nightstand, a chair, and a window overlooking the parking lot. It's perfect, isn't it, Mom? Andrew said with forced cheerfulness. You have everything you need, and the nurses are available 24 hours a day. I looked at the room for a long moment. This little white box was what my son considered sufficient for the woman who had brought him into the world, who had raised him, who had sacrificed her own comfort to give him the education that had made him a successful professional. Yes, I said finally. It's exactly what I expected. We returned to the office to complete the paperwork. The director spread several forms on her desk while explaining the visiting hours, the institution's rules, the medical procedures. We just need you to sign here, she said, pointing to a line on the first document, to authorize your voluntary admission. I took the pen Andrew offered me and held it over the paper. This was the moment. The moment I was supposed to sign my own sentence, to accept being thrown away like an object that was no longer useful. Instead of signing, I placed the pen on the desk. Before I sign, I said in a clear, strong voice, I'd like to ask a few questions. The director nodded, clearly accustomed to these kinds of last-minute doubts. How many times a week can my family visit me? Well, visiting hours are Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays from 3 to 5 in the afternoon. And what if my family can't come during those hours? We understand that families have commitments, Mrs. Miller. That's why we have flexible hours. And what happens if weeks go by without anyone visiting me? An uncomfortable silence filled the office. Andrew shifted in his chair. Mom, we're going to come often. Like you visited Patricia's grandmother, I interrupted. 3 times in 2 years. The director cleared her throat, uncomfortable. This kind of family confrontation was clearly not in her procedure manual. Mrs. Miller, she intervened, we understand this is a difficult time, but do you know why I'm here? I asked. looking her directly in the eyes. Well, your son explained that you need specialized care. My son lied, I said with a clarity that made Andrew turn pale. I'm here because they want to take my house, and they don't know what to do with me. Mom, that's not true. Andrew started, but I raised my hand to silence him. Am I done talking? For 64 years, I have listened to others speak for me, decide for me, plan my life without asking my opinion. Today, it's my turn to speak. I stood up and walked to the office window. From there, I could see the parking lot where other families left their elderly relatives like one abandons a broken-down car. Ma'am? I said to the director without turning around. Do you have children? Yes, Mrs. Miller. I have 2. Did you raise them? Yes, of course. Did you sacrifice for them? Did you stop buying things you wanted to give them what they needed? Did you stay up late when they were sick? Did you work extra to pay for their education? Yes, that's what any mother does. Exactly, I said, turning to look at Andrew. It's what any mother does. And when those children grow up, what do you think is the right way to thank that mother for her sacrifices? The director glanced nervously between Andrew and me. This conversation had clearly taken a turn she hadn't expected. Well, I would hope my children would respect me. And put you in a home to take your house? I asked directly. Mom, stop, Andrew said, standing up. You're making an unnecessary scene. No, Andrew. What was unnecessary was pretending for 5 years that you wanted me in your house when all you were waiting for was the right moment to get rid of me. I took the documents I had prepared with Mr. Ramirez from my purse. Ma'am, I want you to know that I will not be signing any admission papers today, and I want my son to know why. I spread the documents on the director's desk. This is my new will, I announced, my voice echoing in the small office. In it, I bequeath all my assets to charitable institutions that truly care for the elderly with love and respect. Andrew quickly moved to look at the papers, his face draining of color as he read. Also, I continued, I have filed a formal complaint for forgery with the relevant authorities. The house you think is yours will be investigated, along with all the documents you made me sign when I was sedated from the pain of losing your father. Mom? This is insane, Andrew stammered. You know what's insane, son? That a 64-year-old woman has to legally protect herself from her own family. The director had fallen completely silent, an unwilling witness to a family confrontation that clearly exceeded her professional experience. And finally, I said, putting the documents back in my purse, I want you to know that from this day forward, Carol Ann Miller will not allow anyone else to make decisions for her. I will not go to this home. I will not continue to maintain a house that is not mine, and I will not continue to buy the love of a family that only sees me as a source of money. I walked to the office door with a dignity I hadn't felt in years. Ma'am, thank you for your time. Andrew, we'll see each other in court. And I walked out of that office, leaving behind not only my son, but 40 years of letting others control my life. For the first time in decades, Carol Ann Miller was free. I walked out of that assisted living facility with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Absolute freedom. Every step that took me away from that white building was a step toward a life that finally belonged to me. I sat on a bench in the small park across from the residence and took out my phone to make the call I had been planning for days. Mr. Ramirez, it's Carol Miller. Everything went exactly as you predicted. His voice sounded satisfied on the other end of the line. I'm very glad to hear that, Mrs. Miller. Are you ready to implement Phase 2 of our plan? More than ready. An hour later, a taxi took me back to Pasadena, but not to the house that was no longer mine. My destination was a small apartment on a quiet street in Old Pasadena that I had rented 3 days earlier, when Andrew and Patricia still believed they had everything under control. It was a small but bright second-floor apartment with a balcony overlooking the tree-lined street. 1 bedroom, a living dining area, a full kitchen, and a bathroom. Everything a 64-year-old woman needed to start over. Most importantly, it was mine. Mine by right, paid for with my money, decorated to my taste, with no need to ask anyone for permission. I had spent the last 3 days furnishing it with simple but beautiful things. A queen-sized bed because after 5 years of sleeping in the single guest bed in my own house, I deserved space to stretch out. A comfortable beige armchair where I could read the books I had stopped enjoying because Patricia considered romance novels to be for teenagers. A dining table for 4, because I had decided I was going to invite people over to cook for those who valued me. The first thing I did upon arriving was make a cup of chamomile tea and sit on my balcony. From there, I could watch the life on the street. Families strolling with their children, young people in the cafes, elderly people feeding pigeons in the small park opposite. For the first time in years, I didn't feel excluded from that normal life. I was part of it. My phone began to ring insistently. Andrew, surely. I let it ring until it stopped. Then Patricia. Then Andrew again. The phone buzzed with messages I didn't bother to read. For the first time in decades, other people's crises were not my immediate responsibility. On the 3rd day in my new home, having established a wonderful routine of waking when my body was ready, eating breakfast on my balcony while reading the newspaper, and cooking exactly what I craved, David called from Austin. "Mom, what happened?" Andrew told me some crazy story about the nursing home and some documents. "Hello, David," I replied with a calmness that clearly unnerved him. "How's the family?" "Mom, don't change the subject. Andrew says you've lost your mind, that you hired a lawyer, that you're threatening to sue him. David, honey, have you ever wondered why a 64-year-old woman who raised 2 exemplary sons, who was a respected teacher for 30 years, who cared for her sick husband until his last day, would suddenly lose her mind?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Well, older people sometimes." "Sometimes what, David? Realize their own children are using them? Decide they're no longer going to allow themselves to be treated like emotional ATMs? Mom, you don't understand the whole situation. Andrew explained to me that—" "David," I interrupted firmly, "I understand the situation perfectly. For 5 years I maintained a house that your brother put in his name by forging my signature. For 5 years, I paid all the expenses while he saved his money to remodel it and live in luxury. And when it was no longer convenient for them to have me around, they decided to lock me in a home to take everything. Mom, that sounds so what? Cruel? Yes, it is. Unjust? That too. Very common among families who see their elders as burdens? Unfortunately, yes." David sighed on the other end of the line. "What do you want me to do, Mom?" "I don't want you to do anything, son. I just want you to remember this conversation the next time you ask to borrow money from me." After hanging up, I sat in my new armchair, looking at the plants I had bought to brighten my living room. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. There was no one yelling at me for not having dinner ready on time, no one criticizing the way I folded the laundry, no one making me feel like my existence was an inconvenience. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in decades: go for a walk with no destination in mind. I put on my favorite dress, the one with small flowers that Patricia always said made me look dowdy, and went out to explore my new neighborhood. I discovered a small bookstore 3 blocks from my apartment, where the owner, a man my age named Frank, recommended novels I hadn't read. I bought 3 books and we ended up chatting for an hour about literature, about life in Pasadena, about how hard it was to find good independent bookstores anymore. "Do you live alone?" he asked with the genuine curiosity of someone not used to seeing women my age living independently. "Yes, and it's wonderful," I replied with a smile that surprised me with its spontaneity. "Aren't you afraid?" "You know what I was afraid of? Living in a house where I wasn't welcome, where every day I had to prove I deserved the space I occupied. That was terrifying." Frank nodded in understanding. "My wife passed away 3 years ago," he told me. "My kids wanted me to move in with one of them, but I chose to stay on my own. They say I'm stubborn, but I think I'm free." "You're not stubborn," I told him. "You know your worth." That night, cooking for myself in my small but perfect kitchen, I realized I had forgotten what it felt like to cook for pleasure instead of obligation. I made beef bourguignon, my favorite dish, using my grandmother's recipe that I had perfected over the years, but had never been able to make at Andrew's house because Patricia found it too heavy. As I ate at my new table, with my new dishes, in my new apartment, I thought of all the women my age who were in nursing homes right now, not because they needed it medically, but because their families had decided they were inconvenient. I thought of all the grandmothers raising grandchildren while their children worked, paying bills with their meager pensions, being treated as free nannies until they couldn't do it anymore. I made a decision that night. With the savings I had left after setting up my new home, I was going to create something. I didn't know what exactly, but I was going to use my experience, my pain transformed into wisdom, to help other women like me. The next day, I called Mr. Ramirez. Mr. Ramirez, I want to start a foundation for older women who need legal and emotional support to become independent from abusive families. That sounds like an excellent idea, Mrs. Miller. Have you thought of a name? Yes, I replied without hesitation. It's going to be called Renewed Hope. A week later, Sebastian knocked on my door. He was alone, his eyes red from crying, a small backpack on his shoulders. Grandma? Can I come in? My heart leaped at the sight of him, but I kept calm. Of course, sweetheart. How did you find my address? I looked it up online, he said, coming in and looking around my apartment with curiosity. Grandma, it's really nice in here. Thank you, Sebastian. Do your parents know you're here? He shook his head, tears starting to roll down his cheeks. Grandma, everything is awful at home. Mom and Dad are fighting all the time. Mom says it's all your fault, that you left them bankrupt. Dad says you're ungrateful. And I just want you to come back. I knelt in front of him and took his small hands in mine. Sebastian, sweetheart, listen to me carefully. I didn't leave your parents bankrupt. I stopped supporting them. That's very different. What do you mean? It means that for 5 years, Grandma paid the electricity, the water, the gas, and the food for a house where she wasn't welcome. Now your parents have to pay their own expenses like all adults do. Sebastian processed this information with the seriousness children have when they finally understand something important. And is that why you don't want to come back? I don't want to come back because I learned something very important. That love can't be bought. That if someone loves you only when you give them money or when you're useful to them, they don't really love you. But I do love you, Grandma. I love you so much. I know my love, and I love you too. But I have to teach you something. That older people deserve respect, not just when they're useful. Sebastian stayed with me that afternoon. We cooked together, played cards, talked about his classes, his friends, his dreams. For the first time in years, I was able to enjoy my grandson without feeling like I was stealing time that didn't belong to me. When it was time to take him back, he told me, Grandma, when I grow up, I want to have an apartment like yours. Small, but nice. Do you know what the nicest thing about this apartment is, Sebastian? What? That it's mine. That no one can kick me out of here because they don't like who I am. That night, after returning Sebastian to his parents, who received me with a coldness that no longer hurt me, I sat on my balcony with a glass of red wine, something I hadn't allowed myself in years because Patricia used to say that older ladies who drink alone look pitiful. I looked at the stars over Pasadena and thanked each one for the strength they had given me to free myself, for the clarity to see my own worth, for the chance to start over at 64. Carol Ann Miller had been resurrected, and this time, no one was going to decide for her how to live her life. 6 months later, as I sipped coffee on my apartment balcony watching the morning life of Pasadena, I reflected on how much a life can change when a person decides they deserve respect. The ringing of my phone pulled me from my thoughts. It was Patricia. For the first 3 months after my liberation, the calls had been daily. First pleading, then angry, then desperate. Andrew had offered to negotiate, as if my dignity were something to be haggled over in a marketplace. Patricia had gone so far as to bring Sebastian to convince me to come back, using my grandson as an emotional shield in a war she had started. But this call sounded different. Carol, Patricia said, her voice one I hadn't heard in years. I need to talk to you. I'm listening, Patricia. Andrew and we're getting a divorce. I didn't feel the vengeful satisfaction I might have expected, only a deep sadness for Sebastian, who would pay the price for his parents' selfish decisions. And Sebastian? He's going to live with me. Andrew doesn't want to take care of a child by himself. Her voice trembled slightly. Carol, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything that happened, but could you help me by watching him some afternoons? I got a job at an ad agency, but the hours are long and... The irony was perfect. The woman who had planned to lock me in a home because I was a burden now needed me to take care of her son. Patricia, I said with a calmness that surprised even me, Sebastian is welcome to visit me whenever he wants, but I will not be your free babysitter. If you need childcare, there are professional services that charge for that. Carol, please. Patricia, for 5 years I was your unpaid housekeeper. I cooked, cleaned, cared for your son, paid the bills for a house that wasn't mine, and all I got in return was humiliation and contempt. That woman no longer exists. What do you want me to do? Apologize? No, Patricia. Apologies imply there's something to repair. I no longer need your repentance. I just need you to respect my boundaries. After hanging up, I thought about how strange it was not to feel anger. For months, I had waited for this moment, for them to come asking for help, for them to realize everything they had lost by despising me. But now that it had arrived, I only felt an immense tranquility. My new life had been filled with purpose. The Renewed Hope Foundation had started as a small project in my apartment, but we had already helped 12 older women gain independence from situations of family abuse. I worked with a team of volunteer lawyers, psychologists specializing in elder care, and social workers who shared my conviction that old age should not be synonymous with vulnerability. Every case was different, but the patterns repeated. Sons who took over their mothers' properties with promises of care, daughters-in-law who treated their mothers-in-law like servants, families who emptied their elders' bank accounts, justifying it as managing resources, 70-year-old women paying rent on houses where they weren't welcome, grandmothers raising grandchildren while their children treated them like free employees. My story had become a beacon of hope for other women who believed it was too late to change their circumstances. At the Foundation's weekly meetings, we shared testimonies, legal strategies, and above all, reminded each other that our age did not make us second-class citizens. Mrs. Eleanor, a 72-year-old woman who had come to us after her son stole her pension for 3 years, now lived in a small apartment in Silver Lake and had started teaching knitting classes to young women. At 72, I learned you can start over, she always told me when we met. Grace, 68, had won back the house her daughter had put in her own name without consent, and now she rented rooms to college students who treated her with the respect her own family had denied her. Helen, 75, had moved to Pasadena from Chicago to escape a son who had turned her into his personal housekeeper, and she now coordinated one of our emotional support groups. Each of these women reminded me that my story was not unique, but that the decision to change it was up to each of us. Frank, the bookstore owner, had become a dear friend. Twice a week we had dinner together, alternating between my apartment and his, cooking dishes we remembered from our childhoods and talking about books, our children, and the city changing around us. He had taught me that companionship didn't have to come with obligations, that you could enjoy another person's presence without sacrificing your own independence. You know what I like most about our friendship? He had said last week as we were making pot roast in my kitchen. That neither of us needs the other. We're together because we want to be, not because we don't have other options. Sebastian visited me every other week. His visits had completely changed. He no longer came because his parents sent him or because he felt obligated. He came because he genuinely enjoyed my company, because he liked cooking with me, because he knew that in my apartment he could talk about his feelings without being judged. His parents' divorce had affected him deeply, but it had also taught him something valuable, that adults can make wrong decisions, and it wasn't his responsibility to fix his parents' problems. "Grandma," he had said on his last visit while we made grilled cheese sandwiches, "do you think when I grow up I'll be like my dad? What do you think, sweetheart? I don't want to be like him. I don't want to hurt the people who love me." Sebastian, the very fact that you worry about that tells me you'll be different. Your father never asked himself that question. Andrew had tried to contact me several times after the divorce. The messages evolved from demands that I return to my place to offers of forgiveness for misunderstandings he refused to acknowledge as abuse. His last message 3 weeks ago read, "Mom, in the end, you'll have to come back because you have no one else." I didn't reply, but I thought a lot about those words. It was true that I had no one else in the traditional sense. I didn't have a family to support me financially. I didn't have children who felt obligated to care for me out of gratitude or guilt. But I had something much more valuable. I had a life that was genuinely mine. I had friends who valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. I had a purpose that got me up each morning with energy. I had a home where every object had been chosen by me, where every decision was mine, where the silence was peace instead of tension. One Saturday afternoon, while organizing the foundation's files at my dining table, I found the first letter written to me by one of the women we had helped. Blanche, 69 years old, wrote to me from her new apartment in Santa Monica. "Dear Carol, when I came to Renewed Hope, I thought my life was over. My children had convinced me I was a burden, that I couldn't survive without them. You taught me that independence isn't measured by age, but by will. Today, I am 70 years old, and I am living the fullest time of my life. Thank you for reminding me that it's never too late to rescue yourself." She had sent me that letter 4 months ago, and it still moved me every time I read it, because it perfectly summarized what I had learned, that rescuing yourself is not only possible at any age, but it's an act of courage that can inspire others to do the same. That evening, as I ate dinner on my balcony watching the sunset paint the Pasadena sky orange, I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, the Carol who accepted humiliation for fear of loneliness, the Carol who paid for the privilege of being despised, the Carol who had mistaken love for the habit of being used. That woman had died the morning she decided not to sign her admission papers to the nursing home. In her place, Carol Ann Miller was born, a free, dignified woman, surrounded by people who genuinely valued her. The phone rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Frank. "Carol, have you seen the sunset from your balcony?" "I'm watching it right now," I replied, smiling. "It's beautiful, isn't it? It reminded me that tomorrow is Sunday, and we could go to the Venice canals for a walk. Are you up for it?" "I'd love that," I replied without hesitation. After hanging up, I watched the last light of day fade. Tomorrow would be Sunday. I would go for a walk along the canals with a friend who enjoyed my company. On Monday, I had a meeting with new volunteers for the foundation. On Tuesday, Sebastian was coming over to cook with me. On Wednesday, I had a dentist appointment that I'd been putting off for years because Patricia said it was an unnecessary expense. A simple life, but completely my own. A life where every decision was mine, where every day was a conscious choice of how I wanted to live it. I poured myself a glass of the red wine I had bought that afternoon, just because I felt like it, and made a silent toast. To all the women who didn't yet know they deserved respect. To all those in the process of discovering it. And to all those who, like me, had found the courage to start over. The sweetest revenge hadn't been watching my family suffer the consequences of their actions. The sweetest revenge had been my own freedom. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between being respected and continuing to be used? Do you know someone who has gone through something similar? Tell me in the comments if this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone special. If you liked this story of transformation and freedom, give it a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it. Because it's never too late to rescue yourself.